when having a discussion with somebody who has wildly different views than you do, one of the things that can be very helpful is to show the person, hey, I understand where you're coming from. The problem in the case of religion versus atheism is that it seems like we might be operating with different definitions. And so when someone says, well, I used to be this thing, but now I'm this other thing, the person that's listening to them might say, well, how could you be the other thing if you were genuinely the first thing? Okay, so to use a more specific example, just because that might be a little too broad or general to really follow, a person might be saying, I used to be atheist, but now I'm a Christian. But to an atheist, if you really were atheist and understood why you were atheist, how could you possibly be Christian now? Or in the opposite, I used to be Muslim, but now I'm an atheist. Well, a Muslim person will hear that and say, yeah, but if you were truly Muslim, there's no way that you would ever be an atheist now. So, of course, the first thing we want to think about then is, are they lying, right? And it's very easy to get into that thought process because it's this in-group, out-group thinking in psychology where basically if this person is not part of my group, then we start thinking some negative things about them. They're liars, they're trying to cheat me, they're trying to deceive me in some way, or they're just stupid. Maybe they just don't know any better. And we want to avoid that if we're trying to have a productive discussion. Remember, the only reason that you're discussing this is because you care to explain it. You care about your position, and so does the other person. And that's why it's really important that we have to both understand, if you're going to engage in this conversation, I care about it and you care about it. Let's have a discussion that is productive, as opposed to, well, I'm right and you're wrong, and let me tell you how wrong you are, you stupid idiot. Okay, those are the kinds of things that we don't want to have. That just turns into a big stressful argument, and quite frankly, who needs more stress in their life? So we're going to start with this. I used to be Muslim or Christian, but then I became atheist. I use Muslim and Christian a lot in this discussion, and I'm just going to say MC because it's a lot easier for me to say, so please bear with me here. So I used to be MC, but then I became atheist. So what is an MC, right? So what is a Muslim? What is a Christian? And if we look at just a simple definition, this would just be a person who follows that religion, period. That's it. A person who believes in Allah or believes in Jesus, period. That's it. And of course, that's not exactly what these people mean. What is a Muslim to a Muslim? What is a Christian to a Christian? So for Muslim people, if you are Muslim, you're a person who lives through Islam. Islam is not a religion, it is a way of life. The stuff that you're doing throughout the day should be focused on Allah. The way that you dress should be focused on Allah. The food that you eat should be halal. The things that you think and speak and say should all, things that you speak, think, and do should all have to do with some way to glorify Allah. You speak in a respectful way about Muhammad, the Prophet. You speak you speak in a respectful way about the Quran. You treat the Quran in a respectful way. Now, it depends on which sect of Islam you're in, but you may also include the Hadith or not. You may say, hey, this is not in the Quran, so I don't care. It has to come from the Quran. That's all it is, and that's all I'm going to follow for my life. That's what a Muslim thinks a Muslim is. So if you have someone who just meets the requirement of, yeah, I believe in Allah, then that person isn't a true Muslim to one of these Muslims here. One of these Muslims here, by the way, is a Muslim that is going to engage you in this type of conversation, that they care enough to engage you in this type of conversation. So what about a Christian in this group? What would they be? They're not just people that, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. They believe Jesus is the Son of God, who was born of a virgin, who walked the face of the earth as 100% man and 100% God, who was crucified, who rose again on the third day, was seen by many, was taken up into heaven. These are people who are going to speak in a way that honors Jesus. They are going to pray more than they are going to act. These are people that are driven by their belief in Christ. These are people that are relying on Christ, and they don't worry about things day to day so much because they figure, hey, you know what, Jesus is going to take care of that. That doesn't mean they don't have stress and normal worries that the rest of us do, but it just means that they can kind of appease some of that stress by saying, well, it's in God's hands. Okay, that is what a Christian is. So someone who was just raised in a Christian household doesn't really count as a true Christian to a Christian who cares enough to have this conversation. Cool. So when an atheist says, I used to be Muslim, but now I'm an atheist, or I used to be Christian and now I'm an atheist, that doesn't necessarily mean they're lying. What could they actually mean? They could mean, I used to be a person raised in a religious home with lenient parents. Okay, that wouldn't meet the definition of a true Christian or a true Muslim. They might mean, well, I am an atheist now, but I used to be a person who never made religion much of a priority, so when people started talking about why the Bible or the Quran isn't true, it was pretty easy for me to accept it because I didn't know much about the Bible or the Quran anyway. Okay, so this again is not a true Muslim or true Christian by that definition we talked about. They could mean, I'm an atheist now, but I used to be a person who was only religious on holidays. So maybe I was a Muslim person who drank alcohol regularly, except during the month of Ramadan. Or I was a Christian person who said a lot of bad words all the time, except when I was at church, especially on Christmas or Easter. Okay, so again, these are not people that are going to meet the definition here. Now, are they technically Muslim? Are they technically Christian? Yes. But if you aren't meeting them on their definition, then this argument of I used to be like you, but then I became an atheist, now doesn't make sense. Okay? And that's what we have to remember. We're not saying I used to be Muslim and now I became atheist. That's not really a helpful statement to the Muslim you're talking to, unless you were a Muslim in the same way they're a Muslim. Oh, I used to be Christian, but then I became atheist, doesn't really mean anything unless you were Christian in the same way that this person is a Christian. Okay? However, in this thing, there also is the fourth option. I'm an atheist now, but I used to be a person who was totally dedicated to Yahweh or Allah, but then I was met with too much opposing evidence. Now, this is something that's pretty difficult for the true Muslim or true Christian group to follow or to really want to internalize. This idea that a person can be genuinely faithful, genuinely believe that they've had answered prayers, genuinely believe that they've had word from Allah or the Holy Spirit had come and touched them, genuinely believe in a heaven and a hell, and that they genuinely believe that the writings of their religious text were totally 100% true, and then they got out of their religion. It's very difficult for someone to accept that because, after all, if that was the answer, I wouldn't have a different answer from you, right? We all like to think of ourselves as the most rational, most reasonable people that make our decisions based on evidence and our best understanding. Unfortunately, we are prone to error, okay? And that's why we want to have these discussions to find out, am I in error or is the other person in error? And so we don't want to come at each other with, I'm right and you're wrong, because if we're both arguing that, then there's really no point in having this discussion. Let's save the stress and just both discontinue from this discussion. This is a really difficult one because I think a lot of atheists who do want to have these discussions, this is the person they were. There's a lot of people that are atheists, for example, on YouTube, that this is the type of person they were. It's not that they were just regular people that happened to be in the religion. Now, there are some, and their information or their perspective is also interesting and worthwhile to have, absolutely. But for someone who is trying to have this discussion as a true Muslim or true Christian, when they meet someone who used to be just like them, this is the difficult thing to deal with, okay? So how do you talk to them? Well, it just depends, but listen to what they have to say. If you find that they are right, perhaps it's time for you to make a change. However, if there was something that didn't seem to be answered, and that's why the person became atheist, maybe you have that answer and you can share it with them. But you can't have that conversation if you're not listening. Okay, so if you just assume that this person is lying to you, that's not okay. Could this person be lying? Sure. Is it reasonable to assume that this person that you don't know is lying? I wouldn't say it's reasonable. Most people are coming at you just genuinely. Okay? So what about the opposite? When somebody comes to the atheist and says, hey, listen, I used to be like you, I used to be atheist too, but then I became a Muslim, or then I became a Christian. Technically, what is an atheist? It's just a person who doesn't have a belief in a God. That's it. Full stop. It's not a worldview. It's just an opinion on the God question. Do you 100% believe that at least one God is real? No, you're atheist. Well, I'm not sure. You're atheist. Well, maybe? You're atheist. That's all it is, okay? It's just a very simple sort of position. It doesn't mean that you know everything about biology and history and all of that. It doesn't mean that you're a skeptical person. That's just what it means. What do atheists think an atheist is, though? So if you're this person now who is Muslim talking to an atheist, or you are Christian talking to an atheist, and then you say, yeah, I was like you, I was an atheist too, the atheist is probably thinking, you probably weren't. Because to me, a person who is atheist, who cares enough to get into this discussion, I care enough to get into this discussion because I'm an atheist, but I'm also a skeptic, and I've also had to deal with religious people, and I've seen the negative things of religion, and blah, 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 blah. Okay? That's probably not you as a Muslim or Christian. All right? So what does that person usually mean when they say, I used to be an atheist? Might they be lying? Maybe. Now, this is where it does get a little bit tricky. When I say that most people are not going to lie to you, that's definitely true. However, there are certain denominations or certain sects, S-E-C-T-S, sects, of these religions where lying to a person is okay as long as it gets that person to convert to the religion. However, this is not the majority, so don't assume that this is the case. What is likely the case? Number one, well, I used to be a backslider or doubter, but then I became a true Muslim or Christian. That's what they're talking about. These are people who were raised in a religious home. Their parents were very religious, but at some point, for some reason, they started to question it. Or they started to not make it so much of a priority, or they started to say a couple things they knew they shouldn't say, or do a couple things they knew they shouldn't do. That would be considered to a true Muslim or true Christian, those people we were talking about in the previous section, that would be something they would be considered an atheist to them. So because they're not a true Christian, even if they are technically still Christian, they're not a true Christian, therefore they're atheist. Okay? Because they're not this new true Muslim, they still might technically be a Muslim, but from their perspective, they're effectively atheist. This is probably what they're saying. Similarly, I used to be a person who was angry at Yahweh or angry at Allah, and then I became a true Christian or true Muslim. Okay? Again, this is not an atheist, right? If you're angry at a God, then you believe a God exists, so therefore you cannot be atheist. But again, to a true Christian or true Muslim, this is what they consider effectively atheist. Okay, it doesn't help that for people that are giving these types of sermons or apologetics or different kinds of podcasts and things, this is how a lot of them define atheists, that they understand God exists, but they're just mad at him. They're just being defiant. They just don't want to worship him so they can still live their sinful life. Which also comes into number 3. Maybe they were one of those people that I was somebody who didn't make Yahweh or Allah a main priority in my life, and then I became a true Muslim or true Christian. Okay. Again, if any God can fit on any list of priorities, even at the very bottom of that list, you're not an atheist, right? You can't be. You can't be an atheist if you make one of the gods a priority in your life, even if it's the last priority. If you recognize this God and believe in this God, you just can't be an atheist by definition. So again, when this group is saying, I used to be atheist, this is what they mean. If any of these are you, please do not say this to an atheist. Because remember, maybe from your perspective, you were an atheist, but to an atheist perspective, you were not. And the whole point you're trying to do with the, I used to be atheist, but now I'm Muslim. I used to be atheist, but now I'm Christian. The whole reason that you're saying that is because you're basically trying to say, I used to be like you, but now I'm different. But if the person can show you were never like me, then this is not an angle you want to argue from, okay? And finally, they could be someone who genuinely was an atheist. They genuinely had no belief in a God for whatever reason, and then for some other reason, they started to believe in a God in such a way to be one of those true Christian or true Muslim fundamentalist type of individuals, okay? Those are people you want to listen to. What was their experience? For me, I've only ever heard from maybe one or two of these type of people, and it was something like on a YouTube call-in show. This wasn't anything that I've ever actually met in person. So to me, this type of person is quite rare, but I would love to hear what that person has to say. So hopefully this makes some sense, okay? Remember, again, the whole purpose of saying, I used to be like you, but now I'm not, is to try to come up with this common ground and to say, I get where you're coming from. But if you don't actually get where that person is coming from, if you don't actually have that in common, then that totally defeats the purpose of using this type of argument. So the best thing to do is to try to figure out, what do you define as an atheist and what do you define as a Christian, okay? Or Muslim. That means you have to listen to that person's definition. You may disagree with that definition, but you have to listen to that person's definition. And I've seen people in comment sections and on Discord and on Reddit and those other places where they argue with each other about what they think that this is. It doesn't matter if the religious person thinks an atheist is just someone who's mad at God. If you're trying to talk to me and reach me if I'm an atheist, and I say I can't be mad at God because I don't believe any gods exist, I don't have a belief in any of them, you cannot talk at me as if I believe in a God, because I'm telling you that I don't. So that's why we have to have an issue with those definitions, not only to agree on a definition, but to understand this is what the other person is saying, and this is the other person's actual perspective. It doesn't matter what I was told a Christian is. This is what this person is telling me a Christian is. Did I meet that definition according to their standards? No, I can't use this argument that I used to be a Christian, but now I'm an atheist. Okay. In the same way, if somebody says, yeah, an atheist can't be mad at God, so if you say, oh, I used to be like you, I used to be mad at God too, then there's no commonality there, right? So you have to be careful with how we're talking about this. It's very important if you care to have this conversation. And I think that's one thing that might help people sort of, I don't know, calm down a bit, having these really difficult discussions that again can get very stressful, is just to remind yourself, why am I having this discussion at all? What's my goal here? If your goal is to learn about what the other person believes, then you should be listening more than you're talking. If the goal is to try to reach the other person on some sort of common ground, then you have to take the person at their word, even if it goes against a definition you might have already had for that type of person. Okay, so it's good to just kind of remind yourself every so often, why am I doing this? Why am I engaging in this conversation? If you start to get upset with the other person, maybe take a break, and just let them know, hey, I'm getting kind of stressed out here. I just want to take a break from this. I might return, I might not. It's okay to take a step back. It doesn't mean you lost. It just means you need to take a breather. And quite frankly, that's better. It's always better to talk to somebody fresh, maybe let it marinate in your brain overnight, and then come at that person the next day and say, hey, I thought about it some more, and here's a different way I want to approach it, as opposed to forcing yourself to stay in this uncomfortable, stressful discussion because you're afraid that some onlooker might think, aha, that person got defeated. That's not what we're having the discussion for, right? The discussion is for understanding the other person or trying to change the other person's mind. It's not trying to prove to any onlookers that might be there that I won or I didn't win. Okay, so it is helpful to kind of think about that. If you guys have any more questions about religious stuff or atheist stuff, please feel free to ask in the comment section below. Again, the point here is just sort of to discuss things, to bring things to hopefully a common ground, and not to tell you what you should believe or how you should believe, but just to give sort of a perspective as someone who was on both sides of the situation. Okay, but see you guys later. Have a good one. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.